Welcome, everybody, to Survive and Advance on the Grueling True Sports Network. Survive and Advance is brought to you by Replenishing Care Technologies, the future of sports medicine. To check them out, go to thegruelingtruth.net, click on the top of the page on the banner. It'll take you there to show you all their products. I'm your co-host for Survive and Advance, Mike Goodpaster, and right now I would like to welcome in my co-host, a member of the 1981 basketball, or wait a second, he was a member of the 1981 National Championship Indiana Hoosiers, a member of the Indiana Basketball Hall of Fame. He won the 1979 NIT. He lost in the Sweet 16 to Aurora High School in 1977 in the IHSAA Sweet 16. Am I missing anything? He is probably the greatest rep that Pfizer's ever had. He's got two beautiful dogs. Help me welcome to the show, Steve Risley. How you doing, Steve?
We lost in the semi-state to Aurora, not the Sweet 16.
Well,
Sweet 16 would be
that was the Sweet 16.
It is?
Yeah, because the next game
okay,
lost in the Elite Eight to whoever that was.
All right. Well, I've never in my life I've ever heard it called the Sweet 16. It's called the semi-state.
Yeah, it's also the Sweet 16.
But anyway,
by anybody. I mean, I was just last night when we did the Indiana basketball show. You were mad because I only mentioned two of your things. I did mention failed to mention also that you're one of the worst spellers that have ever graduated from Indiana University.
Okay, thank you. It's so nice to wake up every morning and just be verbally abused first thing. I'm just reliving my days of going back to Indiana University and going to the first 15 minutes of basketball practice.
Yeah,
let's just bring it all out on the table right now. So go ahead and get it out. Anything else?
I mean, every once in a while, right, I'll get a text message from Coach Knight that says, "Abuse Risley." I miss it. So there you go.
Well, and, it's good to know that you got that part right. You do have some capabilities to accomplish something effectively and with high regard and high success.
And since I like to be abusive, it's a wonder I'm not coaching college football or college basketball right now, because that's what we're going to talk about today is, once again, NCAA scandals. HBO Real Sports had a show on a couple nights ago talking about the death of Jordan McNair, a 19-year-old offensive lineman who showed signs of extreme exhaustion, had trouble standing upright after a series of long sprints. He subsequently was hospitalized with the exertional heat stroke, a potentially fatal condition in which the body overheats, typically brought on by strenuous exercise, and died on June 13th. And the thing that was disturbing about this, I mean, they had, Scott Anderson, who's at Oklahoma, who talked about this a little bit, and it's just the nonchalance of the freaking NCAA. I mean, there's been 30 players die over the last 14 years, and it's 2 every year. Nothing gets done about this, and when you look at the qualifications to be the strength and conditioning coach and what their job entails and the amount of money they make, this is scary.
Yeah, I was shocked when I heard. I mean, we knew the deaths were occurring, but what was shocking about it was the lack of oversight that there was by anybody, really. That the strength coaches are given such leeway and such freedom to basically do whatever they want to do and to push to a limit that is just above what a human body could possibly take under extreme circumstances. And the lack of cohesiveness between what appears to be the athletic training department, which is supposed to be the on-site quasi-medical team that's keeping sure the players are staying hydrated, staying cool, in physical condition to do the exercise and workouts, and just the lack of regulation at the NCAA, and then what seems to be the unwillingness of them to actually put any regulations on this and leave this entirely up to these strength coaches. The qualification, they did come out and say that the strength coaches have to be certified, but not the certification is basically a 13-hour course on weightlifting. Essentially, there's no real component in this certification class that involves player safety, hydration, bodily function, symptoms and signs to look for with heat stroke or other exhaustion measures. The nature of that, it's all just pretty much just weight training. And I was just really shocked at how little effort was put into this when we constantly see the NCAA diving into the no get money, no get pay, no can do this, recruiting violations, and the regulation rules they have there, but how nonchalant they are about this aspect of it, which is costing players lives. You know, we've gone beyond just costing players economic status right now or money. This situation is 30 players in 14 years is a rather large number of student athletes to be dying. For colleges, it should be very alarming to the NCAA and should be on the forefront of their barriers, not sitting behind where we're going to hold the next, Final Four.
Yeah, and the thing is, after this happens, of course, you get a couple other Maryland players that come out and outline the abuse, the fear, the physical intimidation by the Maryland coach, DJ Durkin. Rick Court, both of those guys were fired after this happened, which is good, but it doesn't bring the kid back. But when you look at it, what they cited was a coaching environment based on fear and intimidation. And one example, a player holding a meal while in a meeting had the meal slapped out of his hands in front of the team. At other times, small weights and other objects were thrown in the direction that Rick Court, players that Rick Court was angry with. The belittling, humiliation, and embarrassment of players in common. In one example, a player whom coaches wanted to lose weight was forced to eat candy bars as he was made to watch his teammates working out. Extreme verbal abuse of players occurs often. Players are routinely the targets of obscenity-laced epitaphs meant to mock their masculinity when they are unable to complete a workout or weight lift. For one example, one player was belittled verbally after passing out during a drill. He was belittled verbally, not tended to, after passing out during a drill. Coaches have endorsed unhealthy eating habits and used food punitively. For example, a player said he was forced to overeat or eat to the point of vomiting. Now, the thing that's bothersome is this. When we talk about should NCAA athletes be paid, I think this is an instance where the lack of payment for them is what makes them kind of subservient to whatever their masters, their coaches, tell them to do, because in the end, their fate and their scholarship is in the hands of these men who are making millions of dollars a year and basically taking advantage and making these kids who have no leg to stand on here, no union, no nothing, do what they want them to do.
Yeah, there are several things in your statement that bode well with what you said. Number one is the coaches, in my eyes, having played in a major college program with a coach who had a reputation, something like that, I tell you, it wasn't anything like that. We were never humiliated or embarrassed. But the coaches don't see it as verbal abuse. They see it as motivation. When a training coach, it's a weight coach, I don't think that they see it. I personally don't think they see it as abuse. They see it as their way of motivating you to try and get into your inner self. Now, I'm not condoning it in any way, shape, or form, because there's multiple ways to skin a cat. There's positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, and every other kind of reinforcement that falls in between those two. But definitely the coaches see this as building character, is probably the most common phrase that's overused in tying to why a coach coaches with a negative reinforcement manner. So at that point, I think there's a disconnect right there. And I think you're very poignant. Your point is that this is probably never really going to be fixed until the players find a way to unionize. And we've talked about the unionization of college athletes pretty much only for the monetary aspect of it. And this now brings another whole fold, another whole window of why these players need to get together and they need to unionize and form and say, we will set the standards as to what's acceptable for us to be at risk to train and to play football at your program. We'll set game conditions and conditions of that nature that will, much like a union does. That's what a union does when it goes into a factory or workshop. It says, these are the standards you must live by, OSHA rules. You have to live by these rules. You have to create this work environment for us to participate in. But sadly, until that unionization occurs, and I believe at some point it's going to occur, but this is going to go on because it's too valuable. these strength and conditioning coaches basically now are in many programs are deemed to be the second highest paid person on the staff behind the head coach. They become that important to them. And what's amazing to me is the lack of the disconnect there is between the athletic department, the athletic trainers, and the strength coaches. It seems that there's no oversight at all in what the strength coaches can do in terms of making their program or their conditioning program a viable program. And the players themselves just have absolutely no voice at all in this process. And that's got to be the first thing the NCAA has addressed. But that's the same big picture they have with profit sharing as well. NCAA their head is so far in the sand on so much of the important things. I just don't know what they're looking at down there.
Yeah, and I think the thing that's really disturbing here is the guy that's making the second most amount of money, which is the strength and conditioning coach, basically let Jordan McNair die because he didn't know what he should do. I mean, it was nearly 40 minutes after the 911 call was placed. Jordan McNair arrived at the Washington Hospital in Tacoma Park with a body temperature of 106, according to a hospital medical report. It was 106 when he got there. Once admitted, the 19-year-old Maryland football player was covered with ice and cold water, a cooling method known as cold water immersion. It took 12 minutes for his body to cool to 102 degrees. The problem is this, and if you watched it on Real Sports with Coach Anderson from Oklahoma, this could have been taken care of if they would have had the ability to do the cold water immersion right there when it happened, and it probably saves his life. And the fact that this man that's making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to teach a kid how to lift weights doesn't know what to do when something goes wrong is mind-blowing to me.
Yeah, when he spoke to that, that's when I really got frustrated with the process because the athletic trainer from Oklahoma stated that basically he said 100%, and I always cringe when I hear the word 100% of anything because always generally is a word that doesn't work all the time. But he said that he felt that all 30 deaths due to heat exhaustion would have been prevented had they had a nice bathtub on the field. So in the simplicity of the whole process, at the NCAA, and apparently they've drafted an entire report that they've given to the NCAA about actions and precautions, safety procedures that should be put into place that the athletic department, that the NCAA came at and said would be too disruptive for many athletic departments to put into place. I think that was the statement I wrote. The last statement I wrote down was that the NCAA came back out and said it was going to be too difficult for them to implement all this. It sounds like all you really need to do is, one, limit what your curriculum is and have a regimented curriculum that's guidelines set down by the NCAA that you can't do this, this, or that. And then it needs to come out that every field there should be 2 to 3 ice baths sitting on the field right there. I remember watching the U.S. Open tennis tournament this summer in New York, and when the temperature was soaring way above 100, every, I think, 2 sets or something like that, every set, the players were allowed to be given a 10-minute break to go in and take an ice bath if they wanted to at that point to cool their body temperature down. I mean, the Tennis Association sees that. So you put these ice baths right out on the field. Why not just put them right on the field if a player starts showing signs and symptoms? How difficult can that be to carry out 3 tubs, fill it with water, and fill it with ice and let them sit out there? Player gets in difficulty or drops, says, hey, get his body temperature taken right now. You have a trainer out there with a thermometer. You take his body temperature or a measuring gun or however they measure it. You put him in the ice bath. You cool him down, and then you sit him. Secondly, how is there not an ambulance? Maybe there is. I don't know. I haven't been to a college football practice, but why would there not be an ambulance sitting on the field at every practice these days?
Yeah, it's mandatory.
The amount of money these athletes. Yeah, it's mandatory for a game. Why should it not be mandatory for practice and conditioning? I mean, let's face it. I've said this before. You've heard me say it on the show before. Games were a vacation to us. There was no game that I ever worked as hard in as I did practice every day of the year in basketball. You worked infinitely harder in practice, yet there was an ambulance at the game. There was always one sitting down in the corridors of Assembly Hall. There was an ambulance backed up, ready to go. if some player needed to get there or get to the hospital. Yeah, why not have an ambulance sitting there ready to go, a paramedic sitting there? They can make the runs. We did it in youth football on Saturdays. We asked one of the fire stations, basically, can we park an ambulance here on Saturdays and you just make your runs out of there? Because it was basically 3 miles from the fire station. So the paramedics, whenever they could, would actually just park there in the parking lot of the football field where we had 1,100 youth football kids coming through on any given Saturday playing football. The ambulance would just run, and if they got a call on a run, they took off and did a run. And then we had a police car there as well that was a paramedic-trained police officer. So we always made sure there was proper medical sincere. Why would every university not have an ambulance sitting there? And then thirdly, in this day and age, with the amount of people that want to be jock sniffers and be part of these big-time college football programs and stand on the sidelines, why is there not a team physician at every practice? And even above and beyond a trainer. I understand athletic trainers can deal with most of the stuff, but why would there just not be a young team physician? Most every one of these major football programs
because they can
are tied to some medical school. They can afford it. They can afford to pay somebody for 3 hours in the afternoon to be a team doctor of the day. I mean, good golly, the U.S. Senate, the Capitol, has doctors of the day. The State House in Indianapolis has doctor of the day. They have a doctor on call at the State House every day that they're in session. Why would the university not put a physician on the practice field who is a sports medicine-minded physician who sees the symptoms immediately and says, okay, that's it? I mean, they kind of started to do it with this concussion protocol thing now in the NFL, where if you show any sign or symptom at all, you immediately put it into a concussion protocol testing. There should be the same for heat conditioning, training, and exhaustion, things of that. Players start falling down in 100-degree heat, and they're not sweating. That's a red flag, and somebody of authority needs to override the trainer, the strength coach, and the head coach. Say, nope, that's it. I'm pulling.
Well,
and no verbal abuse, no abuse. I'm medically pulling him.
From 2001 to 2016, 33 NCAA football players died playing the sport of football, an average of just over 2 per season. 6 of those deaths were traumatic, the result of injuries caused by collisions. The rest were non-traumatic, the results of intense exercise. All but one of the non-traumatic deaths occurred during the off-season. To put things another way, college players are 4.5 more times likely to die training for football than actually practicing or playing for it. Now, when you look at the NFL in 2001, or from 2001 to 2016, had 1 death in the offseason. That was Minnesota Vikings offensive lineman Corey Stringer, who had a heat stroke death during training camp. That led the team to alter practice protocols, teach trainers to recognize and properly treat symptoms. There's no good reason why college football cannot do the same thing the NFL has done. And since that happened in 2001, there have been no deaths from it in the NFL, but there's been 29 deaths in college football.
Yeah, and again, it falls back on you have this big conglomerate regulatory board called the NCAA, supposed to be looking out for the safety, welfare, education, and health of our student athletes, and there's nothing other than a 13-hour training class, a certification class, that's basically just all done on weightlifting. I mean, it's almost like you should have to have. I mean, it should. I don't know how long the course should be, but it should. You almost should have a degree in it at this point in time because of everything that's going on. I mean, you've got to have medical training. You've got to have medical knowledge. I guess the kid from Maryland that died had this sickle cell disease. Somewhat, it was a known disease that he had, and they deposed the athletic trainer, and he didn't have any idea how to treat it. Apparently, they all knew that this kid had this, that it was a known medical condition, but the trainer did not know what the signs and symptoms were, did not know what the course of therapy or course of treatment was, and didn't think that anything out of the normal should be done other than get up and keep running up the hill with the weights he was carrying or the rope that he was carrying. And there was a lack of knowledge there. So I don't even know if the coach was trying to kill the kid. He killed him by stupidity. And this falls on the NCAA again to get off their butts. And that's a big building. Have you ever seen the NCAA office building? It's huge. There's a lot of people working there. There's a lot of people in Indianapolis that work there. A significant number. And there's got to be one section of that building where somebody can be looking at, okay, we're responsible for regulating practices, off-season workouts, seasonal workouts, amount of hours can practice, amount of time spent, heat regulations as to how hot it has to be before you have to call off practice, creating variances in time allowed for heat. I mean, it's appalling to me that it's not there. And it's not good. If 30 deaths don't get it moved, the ball rolling on that, Mike, I don't know what's going to. 30 deaths in 14 years.
Is 8 years ago, the NCAA began requiring athletes to be screened for sickle cell trait as part of their mandatory preseason physicals. Over the previous decade, 10 football players have died of exertional sickling during workouts. But since the rule was adopted 8 years ago, only one athlete, University of California lineman Ted Agu, has died of the condition under similar circumstances. So this shows that if we want to prevent these things from happening, you can. And it's just mind-blowing that, they don't do anything about this.
Well, and then again, if the NCAA had taken action to require that they be tested for it, then why not put a rule in that says, here's the coaches have to know what to do if the symptoms start popping up in one of these kids. I mean, we know apparently it's not a large number of kids that have this, and if they're known, the athletic trainers and the strength coaches should know this too. And if they see Ted Agu drop to a knee and they know that he's got this, like, pull him immediately. He's got this disease, and the possibility here is death right away. Get him out of there right now.
The saddest thing about this, though, is this. The NCAA it's hard to say. The NCAA sickle screening didn't come from the proactive goodness of the NCAA's heart. It came after the family of deceased Rice University defensive back Dale Lloyd II sued the school and the association, demanding mandatory testing as part of a settlement. So when you look at it, I mean, the only time they'll do anything with the NCAA is when they're sued and they lose.
It's like I said, it's just another window that's opened up with the NCAA that I wasn't aware of. We're also focused on the profiteering of the NCAA and where their money's going and how the universities are raking us so much money and the players are getting abused monetarily. We're totally overlooking what's important, and they're getting abused in terms of health as well. And just a lack of oversight on the health issue, and that's much more important to me than whether a player gets paid or not. And I can hear the coaches, Risley, you're just a chicken shit. Get up and play. Get tough. And I know that's the mentality of many of the coaches and players, and it was not the mentality of my coach. Players were hurt. They were injured. They went right to the trainer and were sent to the training room immediately. And our trainer was always on the court while we were practicing. Bob Young was our trainer, and I, unless he was back taping somebody up in the training room, which was virtually 15 feet off the court, 20 feet off the court, and he was within ear distance of hearing what was going on the court, he was always there. And Bob Young made decisions. I know many times he would go to Coach Knight and say, you got to pull Turner. His ankle's too bad. We got to pull him. And Knight would have just let it go, and put him on, take him off the court.
All right.
So now, I don't understand.
The sickle cell that you talked about was the Agu kid from Cal, because if you remember, that was the strength coach Damon Harrington. He oversaw Agu's fatal workout. He even said that he didn't know that he wasn't supposed to do anything because he had the sickle cell. He also remembered a code red style assault on running back Fabiano Hale, who didn't come back or missed a practice or a workout session, and they basically went and beat the hell out of him and almost killed him. And the thing about Harrington is this happened. Agu died in 2014, In 2016,
Yeah.
Cal admitted negligence and settled a wrongful death lawsuit with his family for almost $5 million. But nevertheless, Harrington was the strength and conditioning coach for Cal until last year, and now he has the exact same job at Grambling State University.
Right. He got rehired. He got signed 3 new contracts after that event occurred. I think it said that Cal had rehired him 3 different times, did not take any punitive action on him whatsoever. And the Gumbel's report goes on to say that there have been no punishments or no punitive actions taken by the NCAA on any of the 30 deaths. Nobody's been terminated. No coach has been terminated. Director was that. So the only reason the strength and conditioning coach at Cal got fired is because the entire staff got fired because of not winning football games.
Yeah.
Not for anything he was doing wrong. And they just let him go. They let the whole staff go. So he takes right off the Grambling and does the same thing there. And, this guy's getting paid buku money.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even know what the rules and regulations are or what the signs and symptoms are of a common, not say common, but a disease that the players are capable of having that can kill them.
Yeah, and the best was Chris Doyle, the Iowa strength coach, because I saw there where he's making $725,000, and you go and you look into him. And in early 2011, an all-season workout meant to determine who wanted to be on the team consisted of 100 squats in 17 minutes followed by sled pushes, left 13 football players hospitalized with rhabdomyolysis. I don't know what the hell that is, but it's a stress-induced syndrome that can damage cells and cause kidney damage and liver failure. 10 of those players had blood levels of creatine kinesis about 120 times higher than Iowa players tested in subsequent fall practices. Elevated levels of the creatine are associated with heart attacks and conditions that produce muscle and brain damage. Never mind all that. 3 months after the incident, which Coach Kirk Ferentz knew about, named Doyle his first ever most valuable coach of the year. Today, he makes $725,000.
And he's one of the highest paid state paid officials in the state of Iowa.
He's probably second in Iowa, but he's second behind Kirk Ferentz, probably.
Who's the head coach?
Yeah, and has been.
Forever. Yeah, I'm sure they all make more than the governor does.
Yeah, and I think the thing that's going to be interesting is we just had a lawsuit with a former player who it was undetermined what it settled for, but that was over the CTE. I think his last name was Plager or Ploger. He took it to the NCAA
one of the Texas players.
That. Yeah, if he played for Texas in 1969. They ended up settling out of court, which they needed to do. But when you look at the CTE thing, here's another one. North Carolina head coach Larry Fedora said he feels the changes being made to make football safer have been good for the sport in many ways, but he says that he doesn't really think that CTE is caused by blows to the head.
Okay.
I mean, he
I
says,
mean, do you have an argument?
I can take the data and I can make it one way, he says. You can take the data and maybe look at it another way. So, I mean, what it is here is the NCAA looks like they're at a part where the NFL was before 2011, which is they don't want to accept any responsibility for this either. But the NCAA has always been really good at shrinking their responsibilities to the student athletes.
Yeah, I think the fear there with the NFL and the NCAA is the volume of CTE that probably exists in sports is so overwhelming that financially it would probably ruin the NFL. It would probably ruin the NCAA. I mean, I got to believe that based on what we know, what we see, what we continue to find out, there's probably a 50% or greater ratio. I'm totally guessing now, but of players that have some form of CTE in all sports, because we've seen studies.
For college football was diagnosed in 91%. It was like 48 out of 51 brains they checked.
Yeah, had some form of it.
Yeah,
and I mean the financial liability there to the NCAA to the universities. So I think you're going to see a continual denial and fighting of this until it just somehow gets put into law that it has to be regulated, it has to be controlled. You're never going to get a voluntary any more than what you're getting with the NFL doing all right, we'll put them in a little box on the sideline and make them do a protocol, and then we'll set them out the rest of the game and reevaluate. I think it's going to be very difficult for anybody to get beyond that part of it. And the athletic training thing with the strength and conditioning coaches, that's beyond me how the NCAA needs to be pushed in the back to regulate that with 30 deaths in 14 years. That's too many. That's too many just because of – and I don't think these strength and conditioning coaches are trying to push players to the limit to kill them. I just think they're ignorant. I don't think they know what signs and symptoms to be looking for, and they let their egos and their bravado get in the way of making good judgments, good decisions. And, again, go back to this disconnect between – because they were in the Brian Gumbel article, the story, they were talking about who – they don't even know who was accountable. Is the strength and conditioning coach accountable for pulling the player, or is the athletic trainer responsible? They don't even know where the accountability falls yet. So that's the first thing they need to do is who makes that call and who has final say on whether a player is pulled from a drill or not. Is it the athletic trainer? Is it the conditioning coach? Is it the head coach? Or should there be a medical staff person on board at all times and be consulted immediately if a player takes a knee? I mean, if the player drops to the ground from exhaustion, that's a red flag. Okay, unless he tripped on a blade of grass, which most teams have AstroTurf, so that's not likely to happen. But other than that player needs to be out, and if he needs to be ice bathing. And those should be sitting right there ready, available to drop a player in immediately.
I agree. But, I mean,
yeah, I mean,
the thing is,
it's hard for us to debate this.
It's just sad. It's not a debate. It's letting people be aware
that
they didn't see the hard knocks, what goes on in college sports. And this has gone on for the entire time college sports has been around. I mean, do you remember Sean Woods, who played at UK? He was the Morehead State basketball coach in 2016, was abusive towards players. The incident even resulted in a battery charge, which was later diverted, and he paid the people that he, abused. And then earlier this year, Sean Woods, of course, was named the head coach at Southern University. So when things like that happen, it's really hard. And when you get the Cal coach who keeps his job and then gets a new job, it's really hard to get these rich assholes who have this power over these kids to be responsible, because in the end, there's two kind of coaches in the world. There's the kind of coach that coaches because he loves the coach, and then there's the kind of coach who loves the coach because he loves to be the coach.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and it's the same with being police officers. The problem with police officers is a good number of police officers in this day and age are the kids that got heckled, abused on the playgrounds in school. They were not part of the what you want to call cool clique or in clique. And their way to get back at people is to go get a gun and a badge and bully people by being a police officer. And unfortunately, those are the ones that give police officers a bad name. There are many police officers, most police officers out there do it for the right reasons, to protect and to serve. But you get the ones that generally are the troublemakers that had a bad go at a bad run unjustifiably as a youth or something, and they get behind the badge and the gun. Well, it's the same thing with coaches and trainers. Some were never recognized, like you said. And the problem, too, is a lot of these coaches never played the game. There's so many of the coaches that really have never played the game and don't really understand the game.
Or they didn't play it at that level.
They didn't play at that level. Yeah,
there's a
better way to put
between
it.
Playing in high school and playing in college. There's a difference between playing in college and playing professionally. And a lot of these guys, you see it, Todd Haley. I mean, I think he attended Arizona State on a golf scholarship, and he's an NFL coach. But when you bring up the police officers, I think the thing there is much like the NCAA with coaches, that this behavior as it's allowed to go on and get worse and worse, I think that percentage goes from a very small percentage of bad cops or bad coaches, and that percentage just kind of rises because everybody else sees seeing what's going on, and it makes it easier for other people to justify doing the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and sadly, there is no recourse for the student athletes. I mean, you said it up front that basically it's held over their head that if you don't comply with what we want you to do, then guess what? You don't play. You don't play, we can cut you from your scholarship. You lose your scholarship, you lose your education, and everything that these kids have worked for their entire lives to get to a program of that stature, of any stature, and to get the financial burden lifted of a college education taken away from them, I mean, it's devastating. So they're forced to comply, basically, whether they want to. It almost is like a concentration camp or prison or something of that nature, where you have no options or no choice. That you've got to participate. And I certainly don't want to compare it to a concentration camp. It's nothing like that. It's a bad choice of words. But they have no say or input into what they're doing. And like I said, until they unionize, I just don't think that it's going to change. And I was appalled that the NCAA has not looked at this and taken action and set down more stringent regulations and rules about what conditioning can look like in the off season.
Yeah, and the scary thing the scary thing to me, Steve, is this with the CTE. When you throw that in, if they're letting kids run themselves to exhaustion, you know they're letting kids play with concussions.
Sure, they are. Is there even in college football? Is there even a concussion protocol at all? I know the NFL has adopted one.
I think there might be now, but I mean, why is it now? I mean, we've known about this for a long time. NFL has been accused of it since the early 2000s, mid 2000s, and I think even before that, you can't tell me doctors didn't know that getting hit in the head didn't affect your brain.
Well, and I'm speaking of my own thought process, not by anything, but it's probably happening now more for financial obligations and legalities than it is for anything, because they don't want to be financially liable for it if they're doing nothing about it at all, and then they can be sued more easily. At least now they're giving the appearance that they're taking some type of step.
Yeah.
And maybe to some degree it is good. But they do catch somebody.
When you get caught.
Yeah, the NFL does it.
The best thing I compare it to is, do you remember the college basketball player? I forget who it was in the early 2000s that came out to say that with the food vouchers and stuff that they would go to weekends and not have anything to eat because they only got a certain allotment for food. And they came out and started talking about how, they were starving at night and not getting any snacks or anything. And then, once the outcry reached there, 3 weeks later, the NCAA changed the rules so you had unlimited access to food and snacks. Yeah,
it's all reactionary. But again, after hearing the numbers, I'm surprised that the NCAA hadn't reacted to the strength and conditioning portion of it. I mean, so when I was in college, there was no formal workouts at all until season started. We talked about this last night on the IU Basketball Weekly show about these kids now, like in Indiana, have been going through formalized training and workouts all summer long. I mean, the freshmen were down there. I went to school in 77. I went to Bloomington probably 2 weeks before school started. These guys have been down there all summer.
Yeah, but
they've been down conditioning and training all summer, and so there's more opportunity to do that. Everything we did in my time and in your time was all unstructured, informal. We conditioned and trained on our own.
Yeah, the coach.
I mean, I went out and ran and played basketball
until the first practice.
Coaches couldn't interact with you until the first day of practice, which in my day was, I think, October 15th was always the first day of practice. That's when the season started up, and that's when you could go full bore.
Yeah, and
with coaching staff present.
This.
So
we've had 30 players die in 15 years, 16 years, and you don't really hear about it except for HBO, which HBO is not beholden to the NCAA. I mean, they don't have any rights there. Places like ESPN, Fox, ABC, CBS, NBC, if you see anything about this, it was like the week or two it happened with the Maryland kid, and then they let it die away. And they will not bring it up
Right.
again because they don't want to bite the hand that feeds them. So when you get an ESPN, they'll do a blurb, like a 10-minute outside the lines, and make a big deal about it, and then it goes away, and you never hear from it again. And they do that because they can always point back to this and say, see, we said something about that then. But you won't see, I mean, this is something, a 19-year-old kid whose parents entrusted him with Maryland University died in that trust. I mean, I'm sorry, but the NCAA, when something like that happens, should kill the Maryland program. They just should. You know, because they need to set a precedent that this cannot happen. I mean, Urban Meyer, the coach at Ohio State, let something go that should have got him fired. But Urban Meyer is worth a lot of money to the NCAA, to ABC, to Disney, to ESPN. So we're just going to suspend him for 3 games, act like what he did wasn't that bad, have a dog and pony show interview with an ESPN reporter where, you know, he acts like he feels really bad about it, and then we're just going to go on. And God knows what else has happened at Ohio State. Look at the wrestling program. We had an FBI investigation last year that caught a few people, but overall, you don't hear anything about that anymore either.
No, they're so big, and sports has become such an important icon of what we're doing. They get away with murder essentially.
Yeah, literally.
It's unfortunate. Literally, in this case, almost literally.
Yeah,
they're getting away with it.
And that's 16 basically teenage kids that have died at the hands of the NCAA, and nobody at the NCAA cares. And they don't.
Well,
because they would put the cold tubs there.
Right. I don't want to say it's intentionally died at the hands, but the NCAA has taken no action necessary to easy steps like the cold tubs to prevent this from happening, or at least give it a shot to where it's less likely to. And I don't see any harm or any disruptive in a football program by making these hot tubs available on the practice field at all times. Not if it's been coming out and widely proven that these things could have stopped. You know, a guy of authority comes out and says that all 16 of these deaths or 14 of these deaths could have been prevented simply by having that ice tub available. That can't be a big issue. So, and putting an ambulance on the practice field can't be a big issue. I mean, most of these universities can afford to buy their own ambulance at this point.
Yeah, even though they're all losing money. That was sarcastic.
Yeah, they're all losing money. They're losing it right into the workout facilities where they're doing it, where they're all building new weight rooms and workout facilities to perpetuate the problem even more.
Well,
so
all right.
It was an appalling thing, but it's a good point. You brought up a good point that here's ESPN that won't touch it. And I remember ESPN, I think they reported on the outcome of the Maryland situation.
They did. They reported on it for a good week, and then it just, they made sure
then it went away.
Yeah.
It died away. But yet, and I had no idea that it was of this validity and this nature until I watched the HBO special, and I watched it on a whim because I'm not a big fan of Brian Gumbel's and his style of reporting.
Yeah, I can't stand him
either.
You
know, but I thought just in the sense, and they did a deal on CTE next year with Dale Earnhardt. Was the other part of the reason I watched it was they were talking about CTE.
You told me to watch it. As soon as I started to watch it, and they showed Dale Earnhardt, of course I fast forwarded through it, but I knew this is why Steve watched this show.
Actually, I just DVR it now regularly because it's always good to have knowledge.
It's
good to listen and read it.
There's at least 1 out of the 3 issues on there that are interesting, and I think it's a really good story. And HBO Real Sports has done a really good job of attacking the NCAA. They did a show, I think 5 or 6 years ago, about the corruption in the bowl system and why there will never be an expanded playoff because of all these corporate bigwigs at the NCAA getting all these payoffs to go to the Bahamas Bowl or the Oahu Bowl or whatever it is, and how that's why it's not going to expand more than 4 or possibly 8 teams because they're making too much money individually with the bowl system.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. I mean, it just goes back to I've always been under the assumption that the NCAA was created by the presidents of the universities. Is that not correct? as supposed to be a watchdog for the athletic arm of the colleges and universities.
Yeah. So
is that not why the NCAA, is that not the charter or the basic charter of what the NCAA was founded for back in the 30s or 20s, whenever it was founded?
Yeah, that's the way
I don't know the exact year. I understand it, but yet...
Then again, the people that pick the run, who runs the NCAA, is the same people that are supposed to keep an eye on them.
But the point I was trying to get at, there just is no accountability by the NCAA to answer to anybody. I mean, they've outgrown the presidents of the universities. It's almost like they can't get it together because the NCAA has become such a profit center for these universities by negotiating and getting TV contracts, sponsorship contracts, and all this money that's being brought into the universities makes the presidents look good because they're able to channel that money to the athletic department, which draws in more students, brings in a higher quality of professors and teachers, better educational opportunities. I mean, it's amazing, but there's no regulation and no oversight to what the NCAA needs to be addressing, and they're missing the boat badly on this one. I mean, this needs to be expose much bigger than just a 20-minute blurb on Real Sports about the lack of oversight on the strength and conditioning programs of all sports and all universities. When you start putting kids at peril and at risk for the sake of making a profit or winning a football game, we've lost track of what we're really supposed to be doing. Again, we've lost track of that word, student athlete.
I got your answer. The NCAA was formed in 1906. The reason it was formed, from what I remember, was this was like 1904, 1905. There was like 18, 20, 30, something like college amateur football players died. Public outcry was to get rid of college football. Teddy Roosevelt, who was the president at the time, gathered like 13 different football representatives at the White House for a couple meetings, and those in attendance agreed on reforms to improve the safety of the sport. So what would later become known as the NCAA was formed shortly after that on the heels of that agreement.
Okay, so basically it was formed because players were dying in college football, correct?
Yes. That's how it got started.
Okay, so here we are, 112 years later, and we've gotten no farther than a 13-hour required course on weightlifting for our strength and conditioning coaches, who are the ones that pretty much control the physicality of the sport involved now. And so in that span of time, it's taken us 112 years roughly. So basically every 10 years we come up with another hour of training. That's what the NCAA, and it's amazing how you can make numbers work in your favor when you want to. But think of it that way. A 13-hour course is all there is. I mean, it's ludicrous. Yeah, but again, most people don't get HBO. This won't even be seen by a lot of people, and the story will not be told because nobody's going to pick it up above and beyond this. And the NCAA will find a way to squelch it, and they'll tell you what they are and aren't doing.
But that is why
it was an appalling.
That is why we are here, Steve. We are here to be a thorn in their side, even if it's just a few thousand people that hear it. Those few thousand people go and maybe talk about it. Spread the word, and before you know it, nothing will still happen because they're still worth a lot of money.
Yeah, no, we don't have the answers for sure, but boy, it needs to be addressed. And there is no sense in for players dying the way they are dying when the simplicity to prevent that from happening is just right under your nose. I mean, it's not like you've got to build a hospital right next to the practice facility and have it fully staffed with a medical team. It's like you need some ice tubs.
They got enough money.
You probably should have a physician on. Yeah, they do have enough money to do it. There's no doubt. Most of them do. Yeah. But you need some ice tubs. It makes sense, prudent to have an ambulance there, ready to transport somebody immediately if possible, if necessary. And I don't see any reason with the amount of doctors and interns that are out there that we don't have a licensed medical physician of some type, either an orthopedic surgeon or just a cardiophysical person, probably more cardiophysical than anything, because broken bones, I mean, you can set those, you can get those, transported. But when you start talking with the heart and the liver and the kidneys and heat exhaustion and the body temperatures and things of that nature, boy, that's minutes away. Obviously, look what happened here with the kid from Maryland. I mean, started shutting down immediately, and they were able to keep him alive on life support for what, 4 or 5 days?
I think it was like
a
week or two. I think what they said on that
was it a week or two?
And then slowly each one of his organs started to shut down. So he was only alive through that, and that's why they took him off. But yeah, and anybody out there who wants to find out more about the NCAA, go to Amazon and find Plantation Education by Rashad McCants. He was on the show about a month ago. Great book. Will tell you a lot of what goes on there, Steve. Any final words?
No, not at all. I mean, I was appalled at the show. I was very disturbed that this was going on and willfully going on, and there was no oversight and regulation to it. I thought we needed to address it. It's a sad story.
Yeah.
It's not a real fun one to talk about.
Actually, it's not even sad. It's more appalling than anything else and disgusting.
Yeah,
but
appalling's a better word, yeah.
That's what the NCAA is, appalling and disgusting. All right, guys. Well, they are. You disagree?
Well, they do good, too. I mean, I don't want to say that they're all bad, but
they're all bad.
They're missing the boat on some obvious things, and they give the allure that their priorities are very misguided, and they want to sell you a book that says that they're all about the student athletes, and they want to make a 30-minute commercial or 30-second commercial about it. But in reality, when situations like this occur and you see no oversight or no regulation being done, and nothing is happening, and when legitimate suggestions have been made that are not costly to a university, and they take no action, there's a smoke screen that's being put up there somewhere, and they need to be held accountable to making sure that the student athletes are safe before anything else happens. They're not doing that to the fullest of their ability.
All right, guys. We're going to go ahead and in today's show, we will be back tomorrow with a preview of the NFL and a few college football games, the biggest games of the weekend tomorrow. Make sure you check us out around 1 o'clock, 1:30 on thegruelingtruth.net. You can hear all of our shows on Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, wherever you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So for Steve Risley, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.